to the world. The messages in his music were deep and they were profound, and we are so grateful that he came our way. On this same day, the day after Easter, the entire world is mourning the loss of the Vicar of Christ. The Pope has died. Today we're going to talk about the history of the Roman Catholic Church as a separate institution from the rest of Christianity when it began and separated from the older institution of the Eastern Orthodox Church on July 16th, 1054, when the papal bull of excommunication was handed over to the Patriarch at Constantinople. Why is this important? Because there have been 266 popes dating back to St. Peter in the 1st century. Since 30 years CE, the Common Era, since the life of Jesus of Nazareth, every single Christian tradition traces their tradition, even Protestants, the idea of protest, the idea of challenging the Roman Empire, the idea of challenging ministers, Sadducees and Pharisees who had expectations that were fundamentally different than the needs of the people. Every single tradition traces their history back to the birth and the crucifixion of Jesus of Nazareth. Indeed, those of us who may or may not believe in Jesus, as I do, we actually trace time. Our birthdays are set in stone by the life of Jesus of Nazareth. And so we're going to talk about that day today because so much of who we are, what we believe fundamentally, whether we are defending the poor or whether we are defending the federal government and the role of the government in the lives of the poor, are factors in our voting behavior, are factors in our political behavior. Fighting for health care for all people has, for many people, something to do with the story of the issue of blood. Healing Lazarus, the person who believed and had their vision, their sight restored, are all factors as to whether or not the federal government is going to play a role in eye care, glasses, surgery for those of us who have cataracts so that we can have our vision restored. So the life of the Pope matters. I remember seeing growing up a movie with Anthony Quinn in it called The Shoes of the Fisherman. There, the Russians and the Chinese were on the brink of World War III, and they had to resolve the question of feeding millions and millions of Chinese people. Sound familiar? The movie Conclave shows just how political the selection of a pope is, and whether or not the church itself is going to address the times that people find themselves in. Will the next pope be like the previous pope who was, Google it, a Nazi youth? Pope Ratzinger, the previous pope to Pope Francis, was a Nazi. Would the next pope be more like Donald Trump, be influenced by the politics that affect the decision of the prevailing winds, or will they be someone who stands for the least of these, the poor, the locked out, the damned, the disrespected? My very special guest is the pastor of Pilgrim Baptist Church of Fort Wayne, Indiana. When we come back, Pastor Raymond Dix Jr. is going to be my very special guest. We're going to talk about this when we come forward on the Jesse Jackson Jr. Show.
It's afternoon drive time with Jesse Jackson Jr. Only on KBLA Talk 1580.
Hi, I'm Dominique DePrima, and it's almost time to celebrate KBLA's 4th anniversary, coming up Juneteenth 2025. We'll be marking the achievement with 4 key community events, including a special symposium, luncheon, and brain trust hosted by me entitled The State of Black Women in Los Angeles. Keep it locked here for details on how to join us for this groundbreaking symposium examining the unique challenges, triumphs, and contributions of Black women in Los Angeles in the areas of education, healthcare, community leadership, cultural and political contributions. This public convocation will provide a critical forum to address the specific social, economic, and political realities facing Black women in LA today. We'll go live with a radio broadcast and YouTube live stream, a public discussion, and a private dialogue with some of LA's most impactful women. It's an affirmation of Black women standing at the intersection of race and gender in times of adversity while demonstrating remarkable resilience and leadership. We will listen and we will speak out and be heard, all in service of finding opportunities and solutions. Please plan to join us in celebrating our 4th anniversary by amplifying the voices of Black women. For more on our symposium and 4 events celebrating 4 years on the air, simply stay tuned or keep an eye on KBLA1580.com and help make this Juneteenth more jubilant with all of us at KBLA Talk 1580.
During this time, it's important for everyone to know your rights. The 4th, 5th, and 6th Amendments in the U.S. Constitution protects every one of us, regardless of immigration status. The 4th Amendment requires a judicial warrant to search your home. The 5th protects your right to remain silent. And the 6th gives you the right to an attorney. Just remember,
no warrant, no key, my privacy. You don't have to speak. No lawyer inside. Don't say a thing. Yeah, we all got rights.
Hey, we all got rights.
Attention. If you owe money to the IRS, this is an urgent message. The IRS is cracking down by sending out collection letters, garnishing paychecks, seizing bank accounts, and putting liens on homes and businesses. They call it enforced compliance. And you better watch out, because penalties and interest on unpaid taxes compound daily, making it even harder to get out of debt. Don't let tax debt destroy your life. You need to call Optima Tax Relief, America's #1 tax resolution firm. They're experts in taxpayer assistance programs that can save you thousands if you qualify. A+ rated by the Better Business Bureau, Optima's resolved over $1 billion of tax debt for their clients. Let them fight on your behalf, helping to put your tax problems to rest. Call now for a free consultation.
Call 800-919-9077. 800-919-9077. 800-919-9077.
Optima Tax Relief.
Some restrictions apply. For complete details, please visit OptimaTaxRelief.com.
Now back to more of Jesse Jackson Jr. on KBLA Talk 1580.
I'm Jesse Jackson Jr. Welcome forward to the Jesse Jackson Jr. Show. Our very special guest is the senior pastor of the Pilgrim Baptist Church of Fort Wayne, Indiana. Pastor Dix came to Pilgrim with over 30 years of pastoral experience. Pastor Dix currently holds many certifications and recognitions for his years of service, as well as a bachelor's degree in biblical studies from Indiana Wesleyan University. He is currently pursuing an MDiv degree with the intention of completing doctoral studies as well. Pastor Dix is also a member of Phi Fraternity Incorporated, that great fraternity of Martin Luther King Jr. and Benjamin Elijah Mays and many, many others. Pastor Dix, welcome forward to the Jesse Jackson Jr. Show.
Thank you, Jesse Jackson Jr. I'm so happy to I gave you a whole government name there, but thank you for having us on today. It is a blessing to join you on this Monday Easter, even though the topic is sad in a lot of ways, but I'm glad to be here.
Pastor Dix, why don't we begin with your thoughts on the passing of the Pope?
Well, when I first read it early this morning, when you get to be a certain age, you start waking up earlier. So I'm up early in the morning. It's hitting my phone with alerts, and I'm reading articles about the Pope has passed. And first, with the internet, you just want to make sure that everything is real and not somebody putting just something up there to play some prank or something like that. But my thoughts are this. First, I was very much saddened for the loss of what I consider to be a tremendous man of faith, regardless of the fact that we share different faith dynamics and faith distinctions. I still believe that Pope Francis was a man of faith, convictions, and certainly tried to live his life as a true follower of Jesus Christ. And that in and of itself is worthy of some mourning when it comes to the passing of someone like that. And then the fact that he was the Pope over 1.4 billion Catholics is another. So I was sad about that. And he was a voice of justice in the world, and very much so concerned now about what would that voice be like in a time in which we live where we need more voices of true justice?
I really appreciate that. I first attended school and had the idea of faith introduced to me as a very, very young preschooler when I attended a Unitarian Universalist school. By the sixth grade, from the sixth to the ninth grade, I was Catholic. I attended Le Mans Military Academy and then on to St. Albans. I really wasn't baptized into the Protestant tradition, even though I grew up with Baptist preachers. I just didn't understand. I just knew I was a Christian. I got baptized by Reverend Clay Evans of the Fellowship Baptist Church. But our Protestant tradition is fundamentally different, as you probably well know, Pastor Dix, than the Catholic tradition. Martin Luther posted 95 theses on the church at Wittenberg because the church was selling God's grace and forgiveness to people who could afford to pay for forgiveness. There are still some challenges within the Catholic tradition that challenge basic and modern liberation theology.
You're 100% right, and the interesting thing is, I would say the modern Catholic Church is probably where those difficulties lie theologically with liberation theology, because there was a priest in Peru that James Cone kind of traced his beliefs on liberation theology to this Catholic priest, who believed that the gospel was primarily for the poor, for the have-nots in the world. Now, in the Protestant tradition, we have, of course, that belief, but we also believe that the gospel is for all people. Jesus said that it was hard for a rich man to get into heaven, but he didn't say it was impossible. And that's a very, very real, thing there. My background, I went to public school to 8th grade, and then, much like you, was introduced in a daily dose of Catholicism, attending Bishop Noel High School in Hammond, Indiana. So that was the time in which I was able to learn more about Catholicism. And the Catholicism, very much a part of the Catholic dynamic, is the sacraments and the importance of the sacraments. And as you said, there was this ideal during Martin Luther's time of the indulgences being sold, and only the rich or the wealthy would be afforded this assurance that they were walking clearly and right with God during that time. And so that was a tumultuous time. Protestant Reformation, even breaking away from the Lutheran tradition of a more free and open worship, a Bible written in the common language where many people could hear and study that Bible.
Pastor Dix, you raise a really, really interesting point, because as I inject this idea of our experience as African Americans, there's also the reflection that within Protestantism, we had to break away for our own from their traditions, for our own liberation theological traditions, because the evangelicals from Virginia around to Texas, the northern abolitionists, and those who had a particular Puritan-based faith, who some were against slavery, some said leave it alone. Our tradition also created an authentic Christianity as well.
Indeed, it did. And, I was coming to into the knowledge of these things again as a young boy. I preached my first sermon at 16 years old. I was ordained at 17 while I was a student at Bishop Noel High School. And so being a teenage preacher, being thrust into this adult world, in terms of that, and then understanding that a lot of what I saw in the evangelical movement. Now, I'm of the belief that the general definition of evangelical is that you believe in spreading the gospel of Jesus Christ, that you believe in personal evangelism. Well, as a Black Baptist, I believe in that. What has happened, I think, Brother Jackson, is that we have seen the politicizing of the term evangelical. So it has come to be racialized and politicized, and no longer tied to its solely tied to its theological meaning. And so here we are now in this situation where we look at how should Protestants react to the passing of the Pope? While I was at Bishop Noel, I lived the first time through the passing of John Paul I. So I'm kind of dating myself a little bit here, but John Paul I, I remember the principal of our school coming on the intercom, and we were, we're teenagers, man. We're going up and down the hallways, laughing, talking, and those of us who weren't Catholic, frankly, weren't that moved by this. And he comes on, and he's almost in an angry voice, and he says, "Our Pope has died," and then I realized how important this was to those people of the Catholic faith, that the Holy Father, the leader of their religious distinction, had passed away, and it gave me a different perspective.
And I felt the same way. I'm going to date myself too, because I remember the passing of John Paul I. I remember the passing of John Paul II. I remember the 30-day Pope.
Yes.
That laid to the foundation for John Paul II. I think he was 30 or 40-day Pope, but it was such a momentous event for those of us who were in Catholic school to see the fathers and the brothers of Holy Cross and the sisters mourning the loss of the Holy Father, who is also called the Vicar of Christ. I want our leaders, our listeners, to understand that. A vicar is a priest. It's the head of a church, a parish, a congregation, in this case, 1.4 billion Catholics. And literally, it means you are standing in for Jesus Christ.
That's correct.
You're standing in for Jesus until Jesus comes back. So with that said, when we look at what's taking place in our world today, Pastor Dix, one could argue that the church is being silenced in this context. One could argue that that same movement towards authoritarianism and even fascism could affect the conclave itself. As I began in my opening remarks, I remember the shoes of the fisherman with Anthony Quinn and how he was a Russian prisoner and they let him out for the purposes of becoming a cardinal. And then he became the Pope and he had to solve a world crisis because the experience was unique to him. And even in the Oscar-winning movie last year, Conclave, we got an inside view with years and years of study to make that movie of just how political the selection of a pope is. And so you've got to believe that when the conclave meets after the burial of the pope, diversity, equity, inclusion, the status of immigrants, the poor, USAID being withdrawn from Africans, no more vaccinations internationally. You've got to believe that these issues are going to be part of the selection process because it's a political process.
Sure. I would fundamentally love to go all in on that belief. But honestly, my issue would be that, yes, there will be people, I think, that will raise that belief. When I was at Bishop Noel, I go back to that experience as a young Black man. Bishop Noel High School was 97% white and 3% were all minorities. Now, our principal, Father Connolly, wanted to get more Black students into Bishop Noel. And that was just something I think that was in his heart. You know, the idea of Bishop Noel Institute being an option for education for Black students meant that they began to bus Black students. They made a real push into Gary, Indiana to get Black students. And I was selected to be on the recruiting team.
Wow.
But let me be clear, in all of that, there was still not a feeling that race did not play a major role in how we were handled as students there. I was a junior and sitting in my English literature class, and the teacher once, he asked me, and you will appreciate this. It's not a positive thing that he says, but it shows the impact of your father. I was asked the question and I gave an answer that was, I thought, inclusive of my cultural dynamic. And I said, and the teacher said, "Raymond, shut up. You're just like Jesse Jackson, another big mouth Black."
Wow.
That was said in the classroom. Now,
Wow.
it was 3 or 4 black students in there. Of course, we're all impacted. I became quiet, but here's the blessing.
Mm,
Because of my relationship with Father Connolly, I
mm,
was able to go down there, see him, and that teacher got dealt with. But watch this, I couldn't tell my father. If
mm,
I had told my father would have caught a case.
mm.
There is no doubt. So I say that to say, you hope that these things will be part of the conclave that's upcoming regarding how do we deal with a still burgeoning racial issue across the world as you intersect that with conservatism rising not only in America but across the globe. So those are things that are very, very important when you think about who's going to be the next pope. I would, there's politics, Brother Jackson, in the Baptist church in the selection of a pastor. There,
Mm.
so you want to say that, hey, we all got together and prayed and God showed us this is who our pastor gonna be.
No,
No.
no.
I've been through that process 10 times. So I
I've seen
can
some
tell you right
sisters.
now, no.
There's some very prominent sisters who've been fighting to be in these pulpits, and they've earned the right to be there. Very qualified. Ebony Marshall Turman up at Abyssinian, and the whole
Mhm,
process that went through.
mhm.
And man, listen, you talking about the politics. You think it was a divine calling. It's that. But there's
Yeah,
some elbowing going on. And don't forget
sure.
that Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was invited to speak to the National Baptist Convention, and an argument broke out on stage. They pushed a pastor off the stage and he broke his neck because they
Yes,
did not want Martin Luther King Jr. to speak to the Baptist Convention,
yes,
let alone that letter he wrote in Birmingham to the preacher saying, "This is why I'm here. I'm here
sure.
fighting against injustice because I believe Jesus would fight against injustice."
That's right. That's right. You should read the book, The Challenge of J.H. Jackson. I'm reading that book now, and it details a lot of the problems that happened between J.H. Jackson and Dr. King.
31st and King Drive in the city of Chicago.
Yep, all of that.
Former Pastor Johnson was a very close and dear friend of mine and one of my seminary professors at Chicago Theological Seminary. Was also one of the successors to the great J.H. Jackson. My father said he was one of the preachingest Negroes who've ever lived.
Oh my goodness! Don't give him the mic. That's whatever you were planning to do to him. If he get the mic, that's over.
Continue our conversation on the significance of the Pope. I understand that we have about 1 minute before we come forward. My question is, in part, that can be answered now, but also we'll continue it into the break. The pontificate and the selection of churches and pastors is a political event. It's not just the divine event. The members have some say in who the pastors are. The deacon board has some say. The congregation takes pastors through preaching processes. And within the conclave itself, if you think Cory Booker gave a hell of a 25-hour speech on the floor of the United States Senate with the profound impact that it's had, if the next pope, and there are 2 Africans that are under consideration, if the next pope is an African and emerges the head of the Holy Roman Catholic Church to speak life into the idea that all of God's children are diverse, that they deserve equity, that they deserve to be included, that the poor, the least of these need to be taken care of, I'm telling you, it'd be a great getting up morning for the spirit change of energy in our entire nation against fascism. I'm Jesse Jackson Jr. You're listening to the Jesse Jackson Jr. Show. When we come forward, Pastor Raymond Dix is going to take us on out of here with some profound thoughts.
It's afternoon drive time with Jesse Jackson Jr. Only on KBLA Talk 1580.
I'm Amber Payton with 4 Things You Should Know with BIN News. President Trump says Easter was one of his favorite days, saying it's about honoring Jesus throughout our lives. He also remembered the late Pope Francis calling him a good man and ordering flags at half-staff. Savannah, Georgia Mayor Van Johnson has been named president of the African American Mayors Association. Sworn in last week in D.C., Johnson said he's honored and will keep pushing for cities' needs nationwide. He's led Savannah since 2020. Maryland's first Black governor, Wes Moore, has launched a streamlined hiring process for hard-to-fill state jobs. The new system allows federal workers impacted by layoffs to apply across agencies with one application, aiming to speed up hiring, close employment gaps, and boost the economy. And the former America's Colored Hospital in Georgia will be transformed into a civil rights and cultural center. Once a hospital and later a daycare, the historic site will soon feature exhibits, libraries, classrooms, and more. Get BIN News on demand 24/7 on the iHeartRadio app.
Think It Up is an initiative to activate student-powered, teacher-led learning projects. Students and teachers, how can you spark great learning experiences in your classrooms today? Join at thinkitup.org.
This is the KBLA Sports Minute with Ray Richardson.
The UCLA football program got a major upgrade at quarterback when former Tennessee star Nico Imaliva confirmed Monday morning his intentions to transfer to UCLA. Hopefully, UCLA coach Deshaun Foster and the administration did their homework and got the right answers from Imaliva and his family before agreeing to let him come to UCLA. Imaliva, who grew up in Long Beach, led Tennessee to the college football playoffs last season. Imaliva wanted his NIL money to jump from $2 million a year to $4 million. Tennessee said no, prompting Imaliva to jump into the NCAA transfer portal. It's doubtful that UCLA agreed to help Imaliva get the $4 million he wanted at Tennessee. But there were other demands from Imaliva's family, including a better offensive line and better receivers to throw to. For Foster's sake, let's hope Imaliva does not become a troublesome diva at UCLA. No debates, no speculation, just the info you need. That's your KBLA Sports Minute. I'm Ray Richardson on KBLA Talk 1580.
This is KBLA Talk 1580. Talk radio. That's music to your ears. We're unapologetically progressive. KBLA Talk 1580. We've got a lot to talk about.
Hi, I'm Zoe Williams, a.k.a. the voice of reason, encouraging you to join me weekdays from 7 to 9 p.m. for the world's most intriguing relationship radio roundtable. Every night, I facilitate and encourage our loyal listeners to participate in the most engaging relationship discussions you'll hear anywhere. So make it a point to rendezvous with me, Zoe Williams, the voice of reason, Monday through Friday, 7 to 9 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Trust me, your relationships will never be the same. The VOR is on fire tonight.
Unapologetically progressive. KBLA Talk 1580. We've got your black.
At Providence, health equity is the foundation of our community health initiatives, ensuring care reaches those who need it most. Heart disease is the leading cause of death in America. African Americans face a higher risk of life-threatening issues like hypertension, the number one cause of stroke. 55% of Black adults have high blood pressure. The good news is 80% of heart disease is preventable with healthy lifestyle changes and patient-centered care provided by the Providence Heart and Vascular Institute. From routine screenings to advanced procedures, Providence provides comprehensive care for the heart conditions that overly impact our community by ensuring patients receive treatments tailored to their needs. Let's stop the trend of being 30% more likely to die from heart-related problems. Take charge of your heart health with world-class cardiologists who deliver the compassionate care you deserve. Visit providence.org/SoCalHeart. That's providence.org/SoCalHeart to request an appointment.
This is Stevie Wonder, calling on Los Angeles property owners to help get unhoused veterans off the street. If you're a property owner or know someone who is, consider accepting veteran housing vouchers. You will receive guaranteed rent while providing a stable and safe home. Help end veteran homelessness and make a real difference in people's lives.
Learn more by emailing houseourvets@lacity.org.
After producing an award-winning climate justice campaign in 2024, KBLA Talk 1580 has gone all in on its 2025 Climate Justice plus Black Health Initiative. April is Minority Health Month, and Urban Family Focus in partnership with Providence Health Systems presents The Heart of the Matter. Providence doctors and health equity officers will participate in informative and life-changing conversations on hypertension, health equity, behavioral health, and community engagement. Don't miss these empowering empowering conversations on urban family focus every Saturday in April at 7 and Sunday at 6 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. Sponsored by Providence, Southern California's largest and most comprehensive health care network. We've got a lot to talk about on KBLA Talk 1580. Download the KBLA 1580 app or log in to KBLA1580.com. I'm Reverend Gerald, the life coach. On KBLA Talk 1580, we've got your black.
You're listening to Jesse Jackson Jr. on KBLA Talk 1580.
I'm Jesse Jackson Jr. Welcome forward to the Jesse Jackson Jr. Show. Today we are commemorating with 1.4 billion Catholics around our world the life of Pope Francis, who passed the day after Easter on today at 88 years old. My special guest is Pastor Raymond Dix, the pastor of Pilgrim Baptist Church of Fort Wayne, Indiana. Pastor Dix, I'm so grateful that you're back with us. Thank you for being on the Jesse Jackson Jr. Show.
You're welcome. Thank you so much for having me.
Pastor Dix, one of the most profound lines in the movie Conclave was this: the church is not tradition. The church is not the past. The church is what we do next. To respond to the rise of authoritarianism, fascism, dictatorship, oligarchies in our world, the conclave has the opportunity to elect a pope, maybe a black pope, two are in line to be pope, who believes in democracy and freedom of religious practice as providential gifts to humanity. Pastor Dix, what should the church do next?
Well, a couple things here. First of all, when you say the church, we also have to be inclusive of the worldwide body of Christ. If we're talking about specifically 1.4 billion Catholics, there are some things that I think they need to really strongly consider. I saw the movie Conclave. I remember that line, but there's some things that they really, I think, need to consider. One of the things that makes the Catholic Church, Brother Jackson, so unique in a sense, and churches like the Catholic Church that are highly liturgical, that have a high level of ecclesiastical order, is that the vicar of Christ, or the papal seat, is not only a theological office, but it is also very clearly a political office. The Vatican is its own country.
Yes.
Within the city of Rome, the Vatican is a country within a city within a country of Italy. So the Pope is the head of state. The Vatican has a Secretary of State. They have diplomats. They have people across the globe that represent the wishes of their vicar or the Pope. So when you select the next Pope, if you ask what should they do next, the conclave has to consider all of those dynamics when they vote for a Pope. If it was as simple to say who's next, that would be very easy. We have even in some Protestant churches now the ideal being birth of succession. If you're the assistant pastor or the executive pastor, if the pastor leaves and moves on, to avoid the church having to go through a prolonged period without a pastor, then they just go to who's next.
Pastor, let me push back on that just a little bit. The line specifically is the church is what we do next, not who is next, what we do next.
Yes.
For example, tariffs have a tremendous impact on highly indebted countries in Africa. In other words, Elon Musk and others have to dig even deeper in Africa for lithium batteries and for cobalt and all of these materials while Africans and the world's poor get even less. The next pope has to say something about that.
Sure.
The climate does matter. This pope moved in the general direction. How women are treated does matter. What about our brothers and sisters, which Pope Francis did deal with on the question of being born LGBTQ? Does the church welcome them? Should the society welcome them? Or do we go backwards on their rights? It seems to me that as Pope, Supreme Pontiff, the person who speaks for Jesus of Nazareth, whether it's in the Catholic tradition, the Protestant tradition, or just a pastor in his local parish, it seems to me in this hour of reflection on what's happening in Rome, we ought to be able to have a conversation of a question raised by Charles Spurgeon. What would Jesus do?
Yeah. Yeah, I would, first of all, let me say I fundamentally agree with you when it comes to the line of what the church does next, not necessarily who's next. You're right. But in reality, who's next is going to determine, in a situation like the Catholic Church, what happens next, what the church does next. If you bring someone in who is the antithesis to Pope Francis, what happens next is going to be quite different than what happened, 10, 15 years ago, or in his papacy. So in the sense of what the church should do next, in all of those things that you mentioned, here's the issue with the church and state, in my opinion, or one of the issues, is that the church leader is called to, and it's good. This is different across religious distinctions, but in our distinction, I can speak for me, is called to this allegiance to the text. You've been to seminary, you know that there's a preach the text, and so they're called to that. But also, you are called to justice and peace and love being spread throughout the world for the sake of the gospel. And so that head of state has to balance those things. I'm called to be true to what the words of Jesus were. Love the poor, do good to them that mistreat you, love your enemies. In a very real sense, have we been doing that over the last 200 years? Has American Christianity been doing that? I think not. I think God's not pleased with this tremendous divide between Christians right here in this country. Now, you have a pope that now has to consider a new pope would have to consider what's going on with those things you said about the poor and the mistreatment and misuse of people and lands in places like Africa, South America, where the poorest people live, black and brown people, and then juxtapose that against how you lead hundreds of millions of Catholics, or 100 million Catholics maybe or more, in the United States.
Absolutely. It's really interesting. Yeah. It's interesting, Pastor. Our producer, Gina Towns, who attended Bishop Knowles, handed me an article that said the day before Pope Francis died, he met with J.D. Vance. So he's playing all of these roles, right? Now, he met with him. Doesn't say he blessed him.
No, it doesn't say that. I read the article. You're absolutely right.
So he met with him, didn't bless him. But it seems to me that the popes and the church send certain signals even by who they meet. And these are political signals, because J.D. Vance left the meeting saying what he said, and he's empowered today to talk about the Pope's health as if to suggest what he is advancing as a form of Christianity is a legitimate movement within the United States. When we are looking at this government, for example, defunding contributions to the U.S. Catholic bishops as an organization because they're fighting for the poor in the United States.
No, you're 100% right. And, when you look at what the Pope in his meeting with J.D. Vance, and I know that the internet is going to have a lot to say about, how does the Pope die the day after the Vice President of the United States is there? And there's been this conflict on how the presidency in the United States, not just under J.D. Vance or under Donald Trump, but even the pre-Trump and go 20 years back, that administration start looking at immigration as a real issue. And the Pope was very outspoken, Pope Francis, about how immigrants are treated. And And we know that as Black people, there's a very touchy area, and maybe one day you'll do a show on this, but there's a very touchy area, as it relates to immigration. So now you have three cardinals that are being considered of color to take this step. If you have a cardinal of color elected to the papacy, my belief is that person will not be able to ignore the political realities that are happening in places like Africa and South America and Asia for the Catholic Church there. The Catholic Church has been buoyed. I mean, let me just be honest here. I have friends that I graduated with from Bishop Noel that didn't go to church at all, but these churches were sustained by their contributions. We as people of color, we believe in going to church. and so Africa has not only supported the Catholic Church, but even the split in the United Methodist Church came because African bishops took a stand. And so if there's a Pope of color, that's going to be an issue.
I'm Jesse Jackson Jr. You're listening to the Jesse Jackson Jr. Show. My very special guest is Pastor Raymond Dix, pastor of Pilgrim Baptist Church of Fort Wayne, Indiana. Pastor Dix, I have a question or two more for him after the break, and then I'm going to have him close us with a word of hope. I'm Jesse Jackson Jr. when we come forward.
While you're stuck in traffic, we can at least bring you up to speed on the news of the day. You're listening to Jesse Jackson Jr. only on KBLA Talk 1580.
During this time, it's important for everyone to know your rights. The 4th, 5th, and 6th Amendments in the U.S. Constitution protects every one of us, regardless of immigration status. The 4th Amendment requires a judicial warrant to search your home. The 5th protects your right to remain silent, and the 6th gives you the right to an attorney. Just remember,
no warrant, no key, my privacy. You don't have to speak. No lawyer inside. Don't say a thing. Yeah, we all got rights.
Hey, we all got rights.
Attorney advertising. Prior results do not guarantee future outcomes.
Founded in Los Angeles in 1986, litigation powerhouse Quinn Emanuel has deep roots in the Los Angeles community. Since 2007, we have litigated some of the largest fires on the West Coast. We are proud to be the only AmLaw 100 firm in the country to represent wildfire victims, giving affected individuals, families, and businesses the same focus and individualized attention we devote to our Fortune 500 clients. BTI Consulting has repeatedly recognized Quinn Emanuel as among the 4 law firms in-house counsel least likely to oppose in any litigation, and we are often deemed the most feared. And after securing over $80 billion for our clients in various matters firm-wide, we understand why. If you have been affected by the recent wildfires in Altadena and the Palisades and would like to discuss your situation further, please contact wildfire support at QuinnEmanuel.com or call us at 213-443-3050. Quinn Emanuel is proud to sponsor Conversation Live Altadena Rising with James Farr on KBLA Talk 1580.
Attorney advertising. Prior results do not guarantee future outcomes.
The following is not a contest and is a paid advertisement by Family Vacation Getaways. Airfare not included. See FVGradio.com for complete details. If you want a 100% complimentary stay at a luxury resort in Cancun, airfare not included, then Family Vacation Getaways is your ticket to paradise. See website for complete details. We're giving away 5 days and 4 nights to the first 50 callers who can name an animal that lays eggs and is not a bird. An animal that lays eggs and is not a bird. Do you know it? Call now, 800-868-6431, 800-868-6431. You're also eligible for an exciting bonus vacation to Orlando, Florida for just $498. And don't worry about anything ruining your plans. We can extend your travel up to 18 months. Name an animal that lays eggs and is not a bird, and get your complimentary Cancun resort stay and an optional bonus vacation to Orlando for just $498. What are you waiting for? Call 800-868-6431, 800-868-6431, and give us your answer. Proceeding is not sponsored by this station or its affiliates.
KBLA Talk 1580. We've got a lot to talk about.
KBLA Talk 1580 reminds you, when we fight, we win. The Youth Justice Coalition is challenging America's addiction to incarceration and discrimination. YJC works to dismantle policies leading to mass incarceration, law enforcement violence, and the school-to-prison pipeline. Their approach? Transformative justice, community intervention, free LA high school, legal defense, and system monitoring. YJC promotes safety without relying on prisons. Their goal? Prevent system contact and help people exit the system through direct swift action, advocacy, and education. Want to get involved or need help? Call 323-235-4243. That's 323-235-4243. Join YJC in creating change. When we fight, we win. KBLA Talk 1580, your voice for justice. This is a community call to action from KBLA Talk 1580.
Hey there, Los Angeles. This is James Lucky Jr., publisher and editor of Los Angeles News Observer. Are you hungry for news that matters to you in the African-American communities of Los Angeles? Well, buckle up, because we got the scoop you've been craving. Stay in the know and never miss a beat with our free weekly publications conveniently available near you. Or hop on the digital wave and become an exclusive subscriber at OGNSC.com. Don't forget to join the party on Instagram and Twitter at OGNSCINC for behind-the-scenes access and sizzling updates. No more FOMO. Let's stay informed, connected, and empowered together.
Time is up. The IRS is in full collection mode for 2024, issuing liens, levies, and garnishments to anyone who has a past tax debt or unfiled tax returns. Don't wait till it's too late. Your paycheck and bank accounts are at risk of being seized. Call now and stop the collection process today. If you're living check to check, no matter how much you're making, you still may qualify for the Fresh Start programs offered by the IRS to reduce or even eliminate your tax debt. It's just a 5-minute call to get your options, and it's free. If you owe back taxes, have years of unfiled tax returns, under audit, have a wage or bank levy, or finally just want to sleep better, business or personal, call the experts at Republic Tax Relief while there's still time. A+ rated by the Better Business Bureau, and tough. This veteran-owned company has the fight you need to take on the IRS. Don't go at it alone. The call is free. Call their hotline number now, 800-652-1714. That's 800-652-1714. Find out if you qualify today. Call 800-652-1714 or go to republictaxrelief.com.
Now back to more of Jesse Jackson Jr. on KBLA Talk 1580.
I'm Jesse Jackson Jr. Welcome forward to the Jesse Jackson Jr. Show. My very special guest, the senior pastor of the Pilgrim Baptist Church of Fort Wayne, Indiana, Pastor Raymond Dix Jr. Pastor Dix, welcome forward to the Jesse Jackson Jr. Show.
Thank you, sir.
Pastor, I got about 8 minutes before the conclusion of our show. I want to ask you one question, but I want to leave the final 3 minutes. Give your mind a chance to prepare yourself for it. A word of hope, because these are very, very trying times. We've never experienced 100 days of a presidential administration quite like this. And so people are anxious. We need a word of hope from you in that regard. But my question is this. There is an American cardinal who is, as we understand it, in line to be considered for Supreme Pontiff of the Catholic Church. America represents about 6% of global Catholicism. Mm-hmm. It's a very, very powerful 6%. But beyond America are 94% of the world's Catholics who did not vote for Donald Trump, who are not living in MAGA land, MAGA thinking, MAGA this, MAGA that, are not waking up to the destruction of their Department of Education and defunding everything that you can conceivably imagine. 94% of the world of Catholics don't think like the 6% of Catholics in America who have joined evangelicals, many of them around socially conservative issues, and are part of the MAGA movement. The reason I'm framing that question for you is this. If that American cardinal becomes Pope, does he or, well, does he, ain't no he or she, does, yes, that's another day, does he carry with him the politics of America to the clave and to the Catholic Church globally? Or does he hear the yearning and the calling of 94% of the church and its historic mission, to the extent that it has, and the extent to which, critically, it has not, answer the fundamental calls of the gospel, the ministry of Jesus of Nazareth, to speak to the least of these? What happens if that American cardinal is the Pope?
Well, here's the situation. If American cardinal becomes the Pope, 100% there's going to be a culture that he is accustomed to that will go with him in a very real sense. We've seen since the onset of Christianity, perhaps the culturalization of Christianity. Italians depicted portraits of Christ looking Italian. My grandmothers had pictures of a Jesus that looked Norwegian, on their wall. And so there
From
was always
Palestine.
this. That's right, exactly. Always depended on what culture was depicting this. So in a like manner, the challenge for an American Pope would be to open up his heart and his ideals to what affects that 94% across the world. And that is always the challenge of any religious leader that has to do with multicultural circumstances. And so religion is much like politics in that sense, is that it's been defined and applied in many ways in a cultural context. Jesus was a Jew. And so when you had some things that he did, like saying to the Syrophoenician woman, it's not good to give the children's bread to the dogs. That was a Jewish statement, but his purpose was to say that everybody is welcome at God's table. And that's what the challenge for the American Pope, or any Pope for that matter, that comes in. Even a Black Pope will have to deal with the fact of the effect of European thinking on the papacy. And so that is going to happen, in my opinion, with any Pope that comes aboard. They will have to deal with their personal cultural dynamics versus I'm now leading a place that is multicultural and multifaceted and multi-ethnic.
I think the word that you were concluding on was that is diverse. A world that's diverse, a world where they're rich and they're poor, that needs equitable solutions, and that obviously is inclusive. Pastor Dix, we have about 2.5 minutes for a closing word of hope.
Well, let me say this again. First, let me express my thanks to you and to your producer, Gina, and all the people at your show and the radio station for giving me this opportunity to share with you. If I was to share a word of hope for us today in a world of MAGA, in the world of Donald Trump, for Black people in particular, I think that we ought to see this from a positive and hopeful and not a fatalistic view. I think that this is an opportunity for Black people to determine that we no longer have to beg white folks for seats at their table when we own wood, nails, and hammer and can build our own tables. I think that that's a very important dynamic, because that's the message that's being sent. When I was in Gary, Indiana, I was writing for the Post-Tribune newspaper, and I wrote an article that Black people should stop living for the approval of whites. Now, that was very controversial, and I knew it was going to be controversial when I wrote it. And I had a gentleman that read me up and down about how I was self-hating and all this kind of stuff. And at the end of his comments, he says, "But we do need to stop living for the approval of whites." So there's a process that taught me. There's a process we have to go through to detach ourselves from that kind of thing. So the hopeful thing I would say, there is opportunity for Black people across America to come together. Amazon is a big co-op. We need a Blackazon. They're charging me money for the privilege of shopping there. The seller doesn't care who they sell to. We need to start doing that thinking and taking our dollars and putting them together and educating our own children. The Lutherans and the Catholics do it. Why aren't we?
I'm Jesse Jackson Jr. You've been listening to the Jesse Jackson Jr. Show. My very special guest is the senior pastor, Pastor Raymond Dix Jr. of the Pilgrim Baptist Church of Fort Wayne, Indiana. Pastor Dix, I hope to have you back on the Jesse Jackson Jr. Show.
I look forward to it. Thank you so much for having me.
This is Jesse Jackson Jr. Thank you for joining us on Sky's the Limit.
KBLA 1580 Santa Monica.